It's been almost 10 years since little Pluto was demoted from being a planet, but today scientists from the California Institute of Technology have announced that they finally have solid evidence for a planet X, a true ninth planet on the edge of our solar system.
It is believed to be far beyond the orbit of Pluto, roughly the size of Neptune, with a mass 10 times that of Earth.
There are things out there, little icy objects that are orbiting in a funny way, and nobody was quite sure why. It seemed like there might be something with gravity pulling on them, but nobody quite understood. And finally, these scientists that you talked about took a really hard look at it, did simulations, calculations, and they came up with the explanation: it probably is this giant planet.
I think I read somewhere it orbits the sun every 10,000 to 20,000 years.
Right.
Is that why no one has seen it to this point?
No, that's not why. It's because it's so dim. It's so far away that even though it's big, it's very, very dim, and it'd be very tough to spot with a telescope.
I'm also fascinated at the idea that this planet could be so far out there and still our sun be the mass that is keeping it in the gravitational pull of our solar system.
Right, yeah, but no, it's true.
That's incredible. And so there was a thought at one point from scientists that when they thought that there was something beyond Pluto, that it might have been all the massive objects floating in the Kuiper belt, but it's not.
Right, so all those objects are out there and they have a lot of mass, and originally the scientists said, look, a planet is such a crazy idea, maybe it's the Kuiper belt itself that's pulling it on itself and making these orbits look funny.
And when we talk about the mass of this planet X, this ninth planet, being 10 times that of Earth, for those who are not scientists, what does that really mean, the mass of a planet versus Earth's mass?
Well, if you could put it on a scale, how much it would weigh.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really it. And so it's bigger, it's bulkier, it's got more heft, it's got more gravity. It's this huge elephant in the living room, except we didn't know it was there.
You mentioned that scientists haven't seen it yet because of how far away it is and how dim it is. Is there a way for them to get visual evidence?
Yes, so the biggest telescopes in the world can theoretically see this thing if they're looking in exactly the right place. And with the publication of this new paper today, they are now going to start to look in earnest.
How much further out there is this planet X than the rest of the planets in the solar system? I mean,
well, so Pluto we think of as the really out at the very edge, the very farthest thing that you could call a planet, even though we don't anymore. And
I'm still supporting Pluto's right to be a planet.
But this thing is 5 times further out than Pluto.
Fascinating. Is there any chance it's not a planet?
No, there's always. It's very foolish to say no chance because you just don't know what you don't know. But the odds are looking very, very good.
60 billion miles from the sun.
Yep.
Amazing stuff. Michael Lemonick, thank you so much. Fascinating stuff.
Great, thanks.
Suggesting the Earth may be on the verge of another mass extinction, similar to the one that killed the dinosaurs. It happened 5 times in the past 540 million years, but this time around, experts say we may be able to stop it. Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City University of New York and author of the new book, Physics of the Future, that we're going to be looking forward to the new book, of course. All right, Dr. Kaku, getting right to it. So which species would be most at risk?
Well, so far, if you analyze the last few hundred years of life on the Earth, human activity apparently has wiped out 1.4% of all plant and animal species, and it is 100 to 1,000 times faster than normal because of human population, development, pollution, over-harvesting. And if you take a look at a zoo, many of the zoo animals that our children love, we may find them going extinct. The tiger, for example, may go extinct. Many of the familiar zoo animals, bears, and realize that 18,000 species are at risk.
And what about climate control? What role does it play?
Yeah, climate change is also involved in this thing. Independent of where climate change comes from, we see that the seasons are changing. Summers are getting longer, winters are getting shorter on average, and we always say that the early bird catches the worm. But that assumes that the worm and the bird are synchronized. Many of these the natural cycles are being thrown into disarray, meaning, for example, droughts in China going on right now, perhaps famine in certain areas. So we humans cannot be divorced from what's happening in the natural world.
We can't be divorced. Is there something we can do about it? I guess you said pollution is one thing we can do. But so what happens, Doctor, if there is not this sort of scientific pruning? Would the Earth be overrun with all sorts of creatures?
Well, evolution says survival of the fittest. And so far, we humans are among the fittest. But we are also at the top of the food chain, the top of the pyramid, and it wouldn't take much to dislodge us from being at the top of the food chain.
So who could outrank us at that top of that food chain? You need to know what animals they need to look out for.
Well, in science fiction, of course, the insects take over. But look at something very simple. We are dependent on just a few crops, wheat, rice, and just a few crops. And if a blight were to wipe out these crops, then a huge chunk of humanity would starve to death because we're so dependent on just a few plants and animals for our existence.
So should we expand our menu, so to speak, or is there something else that the Earth provides that we should be looking at?
We should be wary of overharvesting. For example, overharvesting the oceans. We have drag nets, which in principle could drag the entire oceans. That's how efficient our technology is. Also, wheat production we have to worry about because water is the key to wheat production, and there are going to be perhaps water wars in the future.
And are you concerned about that water wars and that we may run out of water?
Well, there'll always be water on the Earth. The question is the cost and what it would take to extract it, to desalinate it, to divert it, to irrigate. And so the cost of certain kinds of commodities could start to rise. So just because we're at the top of the food chain doesn't mean that we're invulnerable to what's happening outside where biodiversity is being threatened.
You mentioned, we have to go, but you mentioned insects could overrun the Earth.
Well, that's in science fiction.
Yeah, but the cockroaches, they never seem to go away, Doctor. We got to figure out a way to get rid of them. All right, Dr. Michio Kaku, thank you so much. And your new book we're looking out for is Physics of the Future.
Of November 2016. There are increasing indications that Planet X, also known as Nibiru, is moving in a precise direction towards planet Earth. So what does this suggest for those of us who dwell on this planet? Is there actually a biblical link that correlates with the end times as we know it? Many of you believe that NASA and other government bodies, such as the Pentagon and the CIA, are aware of its approach. Your belief carries considerable weight, considering the recent publication of scientific studies claiming that there is proof of an unnamed mysterious planet lurking beyond Pluto. The claim was determined by observations of gravitational influences on a group of celestial bodies called the extreme trans-Neptunian objects, which are orbiting our sun beyond Neptune. The approach of the mysterious planet Nibiru is at present sending waves of charged plasmatic energy particles through our solar system. The flow of energy will finally affect the core flows of the Earth and result in catastrophic changes in Earth's climate, which is without a doubt occurring on an escalated scale. Planet Earth has been feeling the effects of this inbound planet or system of planets since 1996, with records showing a troublesome increase in seismic and volcanic activity, extreme weather patterns, and catastrophic disasters. U.S. and Russian governments are aware of its approach, as is the Vatican hierarchy, which is keeping a watchful eye on the heavens with their sophisticated telescope perched high in the mountains of Arizona. In the meantime, the public is being kept in the dark regarding this approaching apocalypse. The consensus by many is that such an event would annihilate 2/3 of the world's population, while 2/3 of those who survive the initial impact will perish over time due to starvation and exposure to the elements. The question that persists with respect to Planet X is whether this mysterious planet that scientists now claim exists beyond Pluto is the same planet that is believed to have wiped out much of humanity thousands of years ago. There is, however, more to the story than what meets the eye. Based on the research study known as extreme trans-Neptunian objects and the quasi mechanism signaling the presence of trans-Plutonian planets, posted in 2014 in the Journal Monthly Notices of the Royal Astronomical Society letters, there are at least 2 planets, part of our solar system, larger than Earth, lurking out there beyond Pluto, and whose existence can be noticed through their gravitational influences. So it is fair to say that NASA understands that these planetary objects are a serious threat to our civilization. It is widely perceived that researchers had proposed that the so-called Planet X was at least 10 times as large as Earth and was most likely situated at a distance of 250 astronomical units from our Sun, with an orbit of 10 to 20,000 years. There is an understanding that an approaching large body or a star system of planets and moons can trigger considerable differences in magnetic activity, and recent data from our magnetosphere indicates that this is what is now taking place. There were even suggestions that Google Sky had revealed an area in space that had been censored by NASA, showing the winged globe moving through our solar system. So are these subtle warnings an earnest attempt to inform us that an apocalyptic situation is at hand, which is coming from out of this world, something previously unknown to humanity, but which have memories in our subconscious from past lives and records kept over the ages? If we consider the ancient era of Atlantis and Lemuria and what happened to these civilizations, is it any wonder that NASA would redact the location of this incoming body on Google Sky or in their own imagery? Every week, NASA appears to have learned something new that was unimaginable, and yet they want us to imagine that Planet X Nibiru is unreal. As you can envision, the gravitational consequences of a sizable planet moving close to the inner solar system would spell huge problems for planet Earth. Not only are we witnessing climate extremes and a shifting of the Earth, but we are now bearing witness to the very real observations that the 4 seasons, as we have known them, are now blending. So with all of this in mind, we can now ascertain why certain governments are taking steps to protect their own interests as they prepare for the arrival and the aftermath of this large planetary body or system of planets moving through our solar system. Here is some news that has been widely reported, but which some of you may not be aware of. Russia recently completed building or updating some 5,000 shelters in Moscow. They actually have been quite open about what they are doing, but they haven't specifically stated the actual reason for constructing or updating these shelters. But we do know that they have some facilities that can accommodate up to 100,000 people. The United States is estimated to have over 150 deep underground military bases. Coincidentally, a huge military underground city exists below the Denver airport. Now, these are entire underground cities that have been under construction since the 1980s. But this is a need-to-know classification that is underway and is never published in advance for fear of destabilizing the economy. If you do any research of this topic, you are bound to run into various forms of disinformation Now, some of it intentional, but much of it produced by uneducated individuals within the public. Until the discovery of Planet X, astronomers had regarded the writings of the ancient Sumerians about this object as legend. When Planet X was discovered in 1983, they suddenly learned that the Sumerians were not the primitive people they had been made out to be by intellectuals of today. Have you ever wondered what the real purpose of the Hubble Space Telescope was intended for? It was not to explore the universe and the solar system, as some have suggested. Rather, the reason for constructing this multi-billion-dollar telescope and then placing it in orbit was for the purpose of observing the inbound Planet X. A June 6th interview with a Hubble insider states this fact as to the Hubble's purpose. He watched this mysterious body through the Hubble telescope and stated that this thing looked as if it was nearby, and the Hubble got cut off and they encrypted it, and that was the end of any transmission. So let's listen to this interview.